Welcome back to Foodie with a Freezer. Hi, I'm Lori, and today we're going to be making one of my family's favorite comfort foods, lasagna. It's loaded with layers of gooey cheese. The sauce is irresistibly flavorful, and the great thing about it is you can freeze it, and I'm going to show you how. So when you have those hectic weeknights, you can be the cooking rock star for a delicious meal. Grab your apron and let's get started. For the ingredients of the sauce, we're going to be using 3 kinds of meat. It's going to add a great amount of flavor to this. I'm using a hamburger 90-10. Italian sausage. Now you could use mild or you can use hot or a combo of both, whatever your family likes. We're also going to be using pancetta. You're going to have some butter and some olive oil that we're going to use to saute our aromatics, which are onion, carrots, and celery. We're also going to be using some garlic. Of course, San Marzano tomatoes, salt and pepper, some tomato paste, of course some white wine, a little bit of milk, and then parmesan rind, which is kind of a different ingredient. And then lastly, for seasoning too, we have bay leaves. The best pan to use for this is either going to be a large stock pot or a Dutch oven. If you don't have that, you could also use a large frying pan, but in both cases you need to make sure that they have a lid. You may be wondering if you could substitute bacon for the pancetta. The answer is yes, but pancetta is a better choice because it gives a deeper pork flavor to the sauce. I've heated the olive oil and I've melted the butter in my stock pot over medium-low heat. Now I'm going to add the chopped pancetta and I'm going to stir it occasionally until it's crispy. Don't rush this process. It'll take about 10 to 12 minutes. The pancetta is nice and crispy, so I'm going to remove it with a slotted spoon to a small bowl, and I'm going to reserve the drippings in the pan. I'm using the reserved drippings from the pancetta to add the onions. I'll cook and stir these until they're translucent. Next, add the celery, carrot, and garlic to the onion mixture. You're going to want to finely mince all your vegetables so that it adds a fine texture to the sauce. Cook that for about 2 minutes. The next thing we're going to do is add the meat to our onion, celery, and carrot mixture. And here's a tip. Low and slow is the way to go on this. We want to cook the meat, but we don't want to end up with any hard brown crunchy pieces. Also, we want to stir this frequently and break that meat up so it's got a fine texture to it. Now you could use a spoon for that, you could use a fork, or my favorite tool is a good old-fashioned potato smasher. The meat has cooked, so now we're going to add the milk. We're going to simmer it gently, stirring it occasionally until the milk has completely simmered away. Stir in the nutmeg, and then add the tomato paste. Cook this for about 5 minutes or until it's very darkened in color. Our sauce has simmered with the tomato sauce for about 5 minutes and it's darkened in color. So now we're going to add the wine, and we're also going to let that simmer down until it has evaporated. Next, we're going to add the canned tomatoes. Now you can use any canned tomatoes you want. I highly recommend these San Marzano tomatoes. They are rich, they're thick, they have such true tomato flavor. You'll love the taste. Next, we're going to add the whole tomatoes with their juice. And you're going to use a spoon, or you could use your potato masher to break these up into smaller pieces. I like the handy dandy potato smasher. Also at this point, you're going to add the crisped pancetta, the parmesan rinds, the bay leaves, and some salt and pepper. I'm adding about a half a teaspoon of salt and pepper. You can taste it again later and add more if needed. The sauce is complete except for the simmering time. Simmer it on low for 2.5 to 3 hours with the cover on it. Stir it about once an hour. It's going to be nice and thick, and it's going to be a dark red color. Once the simmering time has finished, do your final taste for salt and pepper. I added a little salt about an hour ago, so I'm expecting mine to be just right. Let's see. Perfect. So good. Also, be sure and remove the parmesan rinds and all of those bay leaves. About a year ago, I bought some authentic Italian pasta, and I will never go back. Authentic Italian pasta is now all I use for all of my pasta dishes. You won't believe the difference in taste, the texture. It sends your pasta dishes over the top. This is the brand that I use for the lasagna. I cannot even begin to pronounce it, but I'll put the name of it in the description below. Let's talk real quick about options for pans. There is, of course, a dedicated lasagna pan, which is about a 9 by 13, which is what this is, but a lasagna pan has a lot higher sides on it, so you can put several layers. Most of us don't have enough room in our kitchen to have a pan dedicated solely to lasagna, so a 9 by 13 casserole dish is ideal for that. Something I always do for my husband and I, we are empty nesters. I bought several of these 6 by 8 glass baking dishes. I make those, it'll make several. I put some in the freezer, and we can get about 2 meals off one of these. Another great option are these little disposable aluminum loaf pans. They are exactly the right width for a piece of lasagna, and so you can make individual servings there. Freeze those. As a matter of fact, what I used to do when our daughter was in college, she went to college about 6 hours from where we live, and so I would make these for her, freeze them, send them with her, and then she could have a home-cooked meal from mom whenever she was in the mood for one. While the noodles are cooling, we can use that time to mix up the ricotta cheese mixture. For that, you're going to need ricotta cheese, goat cheese, which is kind of an unusual ingredient, but it adds a really neat tangy depth of flavor, Parmesan cheese, fresh parsley, beaten eggs, and of course salt and pepper. Mix all of these ingredients until they're well blended. I like to put my ricotta mixture into a zip top bag, and then I snip off the corner of it, and I use that to pipe onto the lasagna. I think it makes it a lot easier than trying to spread this stuff out. Cook the lasagna noodles in a large stock pot or Dutch oven. Be sure and generously salt the water. And here's a tip. You want to undercook the noodles. You want them pliable but not fully cooked. When you bake the lasagna, the noodles are going to cook a little bit more. So if you undercook them now, that will ensure that in your final product, they're going to be perfectly al dente. When the noodles are cooked, but yet still undercooked, drain them. Do not rinse them, because that rinsing could remove the starch from the exterior of the noodle, and the starch is what allows the sauce to stick well to the noodle. After I drain the noodles, I like to put them on a wax paper lined baking sheet so they don't stick together, and also they don't continue cooking from being all bunched together in the bottom of the strainer. Well, we're in the home stretch. Here's what we're going to need to assemble our lasagna. We have our cooked noodles, the Bolognese sauce, mozzarella cheese, Parmesan cheese, the ricotta cheese mixture, and our prepared baking dish. So let's get started. We're going to layer a little bit of sauce in the bottom of the baking dish, just to kind of cover it so those noodles don't stick to the very bottom. All right, spread that out into all the corners. You want all the deliciousness. Next thing we're going to do is layer our noodles in. Don't worry if your noodles are a little too long. You can cut them to fit to the right size. I find that a pizza cutter works great for this. But be sure and save whatever little bits you cut off, because you might want to use them on another layer. All right, next we're going to start squeezing in some of this ricotta cheese mixture. And we'll see how my bag works here. It had pleats in the bottom, which I don't care for, but I think I can make it work pretty good. Yeah, there we go. So you get that on there like that, and then just kind of use your spatula to tap it around and spread it out. Get in all the corners. Cheesy, yummy. Okay. Next layer is going to be some mozzarella cheese. Just spread that out there. Don't be stingy. You want plenty of that goodness. I missed a little spot right there. All right, next, back to the layer of the sauce. Put plenty of that on. And spread that out. And we're done. I've made one for the freezer and one for my husband and I to eat tonight. I'll cover this with foil and I'll bake it at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes or until it's bubbly. If you've got a larger pan, you may need to bake it longer than that. During the last 10 or so minutes of baking, take the foil off the top. That way it'll brown just a little bit. I will tell you, I always put it on a rimmed baking sheet or a piece of foil under it, because I don't want it to boil over and mess up my oven. Now, you know I'm all about freezing things, so I always make a large batch of lasagna so that I can have several extras to put in my freezer. And here's my method for freezing. Like I mentioned earlier, I have several of these 6x8 baking pans. They're just the right size for my husband and I, and when I make lasagna, of course I make several. But here's how I freeze them. I take the pan, I invert it like this, and I take a piece of foil over the exterior of the pan and just loosely shape it around there. Then remove the foil, turn the pan over, and fit the foil down into the pan. It's so much easier than trying to start from the inside of the pan. Once I've done that, I remove the little foil piece I made. I spray this pan with nonstick cooking spray, then I spray the inside of the foil. I build the lasagna in there, and then once it's frozen, I remove all of this from the glass dish. I usually take the foil off because I have a vacuum sealer that I put that frozen lasagna in and seal it up that way. No worries if you don't have a vacuum sealer. Just make your big piece of foil a lot bigger and wrap that frozen lasagna up in it and then put it in a zip top bag. That way you're not tying up your baking dishes. When you're ready for a convenient and delicious meal of lasagna, just take that out of the freezer, remove the wrapping. I used my vacuum sealer, but maybe you did foil. Put it back into the original pan that you froze it in. I like to let it thaw in my refrigerator for about 24 hours if I can before bake it. Then bake it at 350 covered for this size I do about an hour, hour and 15 minutes, but you might need to adjust that one way or the other depending on what size of casserole dish you made. You want it nice and bubbly. Once you've finished cooking it, let it set for 15 or 20 minutes so the sauces and the cheese kind of sets up, and then you're ready for an unforgettably yummy meal. Do you like to freeze lasagna? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.